Hello everyone, it's Brian here. You may have seen some people doing videos with the title something like the Non-Completist Record Collection. This is based on a video from Michael at Clash City Rocker, a channel I didn't know before, but I should because he has a giant Clash collection as it turns out. Anyway, other people have done this. I've seen Vinyl Richie, I've seen Jason Skills, and I thought I will take part, partly because I was encouraged to by Jason. So the idea is that you do this thought experiment where you can only keep one record from a particular artist. So I think Vinyl Richie only chose artists where he had 10 or more records. I just walked through by my shelves and I just started picking out records. If I had to keep only one from this artist, what would I keep? So I have a big stack, so I won't say too much about them because I don't want this video to go on all day. And I have chosen items that you may have seen before, but also some maybe you haven't. So anyway, let's start with Bob Dylan. Tough choice, but in the end I decided that, I haven't really thought deeply about what my favorite Bob Dylan record, but if I had to keep one, I'm tempted to choose the Free Willin' Bob Dylan. It's one of the earlier Bob Dylan records I had, and it has my favorite Bob Dylan song in here, A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, but also, there's, talking World War III blues, Blown in the Wind, which maybe is something that's overplayed, but Masters of War, etc. Anyway, this is a terrific record, and tough choice, but I would go with that. This will definitely not be everyone's choice for this band, if you think about it, but Echo and the Bunnymen, I've chosen Ocean Rain, at the point where some people were upset with the sort of change in sound a little bit. I actually quite like this record, partly because The Killing Moon is on here. It also has Seven Seas, Silver, but it also contains one of my favorite Echo deep tracks, which is My Kingdom, which would, be up there in any song ranking I did from this band. So I would choose Echo and the Bunnymen's Ocean Rain. Although I love the first two Roxy Music records with Brian Eno, I would choose this sort of mellow, almost adult contemporary record called Avalon. It has that sort of sound they adapted later with tracks like More Than This, The Main Thing, Take a Chance with Me. Not everyone's ideal Roxy Music record, but I've always loved it right from the first time I heard it, which was probably not so long after it was released, or maybe a couple of years. So I would choose Avalon. So Simple Minds. The only choice in my mind is New Gold Dream, although I love a lot of the earlier tracks and even the tracks that came later, but for me they hit the high notes here with the title track especially, but also Somewhere and Someone Somewhere in Summertime, etc. Promised You a Miracle. Really great record from Simple Minds. This one I may have said in the past, it might be my favorite record from this band. I haven't done a ranking or anything, but The Stranglers, this might seem like an odd choice because this is after they kind of left their punk roots behind and moved into a more new wave sound, if for want of a better term. And this record has a couple of giant tracks that were really important to me, Skin Deep and No Mercy, which are fantastic, but also some other songs that I really like. If you don't like Ears, Don't Look at This. But yeah, the next record they did after this was also really good, and then I think they lost their way for a while, but they're still making music with it. It's kind of a strange lineup now, but Oral Sculpture from The Stranglers. Here's a band I don't think I've ever mentioned on my channel before. I was a fan from the early days up until probably 88 or 89, and then I kind of lost interest, and I'm really not into them now, but U2's Unforgettable Fire, for me, is the band's best record, also my favorite. Also could be because it's the first record I heard from this band, and that's also something that Michael alluded to in his video. Maybe the first record you heard from a band is the one you like most. Now, this is produced by Eno and Daniel Lanois, and of course Pride is probably overplayed, but it has Bad on here. I just think it's kind of a really great album, and I didn't follow them really too far after that. Tom Waits. I've said I would keep Bone Machine, which is, I'm solid in that choice because it has probably my favorite Tom Waits song, Going Out West. I tried to get my daughter, I did get my daughter to listen to it, and she was not impressed with Going Out West, but I think it's great. It's kind of screamy in parts of this, but yeah, I just think it's really cool. The Tom Waits record. Now, for New Order, I decided to choose Power, Corruption, and Lies. Interesting album cover. reason I chose this is I think I was really interested in this record right from the first note of the first track. You know, Age of Consent. Age of Consent just starts with just such energy. I loved it. This record also contains my favorite New Order track, which is Your Silent Face. That was a tough one to narrow down for New Order, but I think this is the right choice. I mentioned this a little while ago. I think Gary Newman or Tubeway Army, or Gary Newman and Tubeway Army, Replicas. This contains my favorite Gary Newman song, which is Our Friends Electric. I love this record from start to finish. It also has, you know, Down in the Park, which is a classic Gary Newman track. So, no question, Gary Newman's Replicas. Ministry. I know Jason mentioned Ministry. For me, I would choose The Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste. Why not? I love this album cover, front and back. This is an uncompromising record. You know, they started as a industrial band, and by this point they were, I guess you'd call them industrial metal, perhaps. So you have things like these, Burning Inside. It's a great way to open a record, those two tracks. Love that record. Not for Sunday mornings, probably. This might be the weirdest choice in terms for this band, but Love and Rockets, who came out of Bauhaus, and they released a number of really intriguing records like Seventh Dream of Teenage Heaven, Express. They had their self-titled record. And this is a record in which they pursued their interest in more techno almost. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but sort of high energy, sort of energetic, maybe not high energy, but energetic sort of electronic sounds. And I didn't really know this record originally when it came out. I heard bad things about it, but if I'm reaching for a Love and Rockets record, sometimes I just grab this one. So, strange choice maybe, but I've chosen that. Canadian singer-songwriter Bruce Cockburn, who's released something like, I don't know, if you include greatest hits and live records, he's up 35 or 40 records, I think. Can't remember how many are studio records, 30 maybe. But I would choose Stealing Fire, which is probably his most well-known record from 1984. Maybe his most, well, not quite his most commercial. There's one other that I think would probably take the title on that. But I love how this hype sticker tells you how to pronounce his name. And this has one of his biggest hits. Well, maybe two of his biggest hits. Lovers in a Dangerous Time and If I Had a Rocket Launcher. But it also has some really nice deep cuts. For example, Dust and Diesel, Making Contact. So I would choose that one. Here's another one that might be a surprise. When I mention the name Brian Eno, you're probably not going to think of this record, but I have always loved his album Nerve Net, which came out in 1992, featuring, who else is on here? Robert Quine, Robert Fripp, and John Paul Jones are on this record. So, you know, as much as I love his early stuff, and I still do, in fact, if I were choosing a favorite Brian Eno record, it might be Here Come the Warm Jets, or it might be Taking Tiger Mountain, or Before Another Green World, or Before and After Science. Something about this record that always draws me back in. Maybe it's Fripp's guitar work. Maybe it's just the sound on here. There's a lot of electronic things happening with Fractal Zoom, Wireshock, Ali Click, etc. I think it's a really interesting record, so that's a fun listen. Here's one that might not mean anything to you. It's a maybe a little obscure Canadian artist called Mac DeMarco. This is his record, This Old Dog. You know, I think Michael mentioned in his video that sometimes your favorite record may be the one you heard from an artist and heard first from an artist. And this is the case on this for Mac DeMarco. I was at a friend's place who has these periodic vinyl evenings in his garage where he picks a theme and you bring records. And one of the records played that night was This Old Dog by Mac DeMarco. And I instantly loved it. Now I have other records from Mac DeMarco, but for some reason, maybe it's because it's the first one I heard, I really like it. It's hard to describe his music. It's sort of folky in a way, but kind of strange also. He uses some strange production techniques, so I really like it. Now here's another case of an album that I heard first fully that I really like. Now on the radio, when I was a kid, I heard lots of songs from the Rolling Stones, but the first record that was in our house that I could listen to from start to finish belonged to my sister, and it was Some Girls, and I took an instant liking to this record. I really think they hit it on the head with this record. I love it. Everyone knows the tracks on here, like Miss You, Some Girls, When the Whip Comes Down, Respectable, Shattered, Beast of Burden. Great record. So I'm not sure what my favorite Rolling Stones record is, but if I had to choose one, maybe this is it. I don't know. In the same vein, the first album I ever heard from Tom Petty was Damn the Torpedoes, because, again, my sister had it. So it has a sort of a bit of nostalgia there for, I guess, just a bit of nostalgia generally. And I would pick this one. Of course, it has Refugee, Here Comes My Girl, Even the Losers, Don't Do Me Like That, Century City, great album. In this particular artist's case, I went with solo records. I could have considered his previous work with Husker Du or later with Sugar, but for solo records for Bob Mould, I've chosen his self-titled record from 1996, just called Bob Mould. Fantastic. I mean, Ego Override, I think, is obviously the big track on here. And it's funny that if you look at comments on YouTube on that track, people will talk about the guitar work on that track. But he did say in an interview that it's totally synthetic, and you can hear it. That it's not a real guitar, but it still sounds fantastic. Yeah, I think this is great. Yeah, really good. Here's another band I have quite a few, all of the records from. And again, I'm not sure which is my favorite from this band, but The National, I would choose The Boxer. Maybe it was the first record from them I had. I'm not actually sure. It might have been second, but it opens really strongly with Fake Empire, which is a really excellent political song. Mistaken for Strangers, Squalor Victoria with that really frenetic drum work. Slow Show, Apartment Song, Start a War. Yes, excellent. Excellent. From The National... In the discussion of what are some of the best debut records of all time, we have to include Magazine's Real Life. This is, one of my top picks for best debut records, featuring Howard Devoto, formerly of the Buzzcocks. And this is just tremendous, partly because it has The Light Pours Out of Me, which is a really fantastic track, shot by both sides, really great Magazine record. So here's a band that I don't think I've ever mentioned at all in any of my videos, but a band I quite like, especially this record. And when I'm thinking about this record, or this band, Level 42, I pick World Machine. This is a record I listened to many, 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 many times. I have it on CD as well. I just think it's fantastic. Of course, it has Something About You. It is a big commercial track. It was a big single, but I just think it's just every track on here is really interesting. So Level 42. Here's a big band that most people know about. And I'm going to pick OK Computer from Radiohead. Of course, this is the OK Not OK reissue, which is really interesting, of course. But I have a soft spot for the bands. I don't really like Pablo Honey very much. I do love everything after, even the more experimental things, but this is the one I go back to most often because I think it's really terrific. Bauhaus. Tempted to choose In the Flat Field, but I went with Mask ultimately because I just think it's possibly a better record. And it's one I heard early on, maybe before In the Flat Field. It starts with Hair of the Dog. We've got The Passion of Lovers, Of Lilies and Remains, Kick in the Eye, Dancing, Hollow Hills, In Fear of Fear, Muscle and Plastic, The Man with X-Ray Eyes, and Mask. Terrific record. David Bowie. I went with Ziggy Stardust, maybe an obvious choice, but it's such a great record from start to finish. I almost chose Outside, a later record of his that I really love, but it's hard to compare to this. I think it's just a really well done record. Of course, any number of Bowie records could have made the cut, but that one just seemed like a good one. And then my last record is one that, if you know this artist, you'll think, what am I doing? But Billy Bragg, Bloke on Bloke from 1996. This is an original pressing from 1996. I loved him right from very early on when I heard things like A New England, World Turned Upside Down, songs like that where you can kind of hear the echo in the room he's recording it in. And I do love those records. But this is one record that I just return to frequently, and I'm not really sure why, because it's probably no one's favorite Billy Bragg record, but it's really good. I love From Red to Blue, just his change in politics as, well, it might not be him, he might be singing from a different perspective, but as he ages, I really like that. Upfield, Sugar Daddy, which is a really strange song for him. My favorite song on this record is a picked song, which I think is wonderful. The Space Race is Over. I mean, there's so many, Northern Industrial Town, etc. I just think this is a fantastic record, and I don't think it gets enough credit, maybe, but I love it. Anyway, so that is my pick for some artists in the Non-Completist record collection idea. I'd be curious to see what you would choose in your collection. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.